Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Thor The Dark World, starring Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, Anthony Hopkins, Rene Russo, Stellan Skarsgård, Idris Elba, Christopher Eccleston, and Kat Dennings, and directed by Alan Taylor. Now, I remember seeing this in theaters, and what did I think of it? Well, let's get into this one. I hate the Marvel Studios soundtrack of the opening from here to Captain America Civil War. I'm just not convinced of it for some reason. Malekith, played by Christopher Eccleston, rules these creatures called the Dark Elves, which, how silly is that? I mean, honestly, when Anthony Hopkins' own explains it, I can't help but bust up with laughter. Loki, returned by Tom Hiddleston, laughs as he's faces Odin, Rene Russo's Frigga, and the Asgardian Justice, and Odin says to him his birthright is to die, and I felt that line didn't make a lot of sense to me. Thor, Sif, and the Warriors 3 are fighting in Vanaheim, and I thought it was Anaheim, like the city in California where Disneyland is, and the way Thor beats up a giant monster with one punch with his hammer, that was a very silly moment of the movie, and Thor is buffer more than ever in this movie. Plain Jane is back, and that's a head-scratcher. But living in London, seeing this guy from Bridesmaids, the movie Bridesmaids, trying to get over Thor, and Darcy, returned by Kat Dennings, tells Jane about her machine going off like Thor is back in her life. Darcy now has an intern, which reminds me, isn't Darcy an intern? Like, really? And then we get another silly sequence with Eric Selvig stripping naked to put two machines which will become more important later in the plot, and looking a little more pale than the first Thor and the Avengers. Poor Stellan Skarsgård. I felt very bad for that poor bastard. Heimdall, returned by Idris Elba, can't see Plain Jane because she's stupid enough to get the power of the Dark World. And suddenly she wakes up and finds Darcy calling the cops and sees Thor returning to her and slaps him twice in the face. Like, do we really need that at all? Like, really? Well, this movie is silly enough as it is. Odin is a very grumpy here this time, then calls Plain Jane a goat. And I thought, let him go back to Odin's sleep. Screw him. He has the whole movie of doing nothing except having very questionable judgment at this point. We get a guy named Curse, with a K, by the way, and he turns into a giant monster who can beat Thor's ass, and his hammer Mjolnir. We'll get that fight later in the film. Loki and Frigga have a reading session, and Loki says to Frigga about Odin, he's not my father, and says after that to Frigga, she's not his mother. And I felt that was very heartbreaking, especially when Frigga dies a little later. So Curse breaks out of prison and frees everyone in the prisoners, and except Loki, which bugged the hell out of me. Not only but Loki telling him to take the stairs to the left, which made no sense, and that really bothered me so bad. Asgard has a fight with the Dark Elves, and I thought, whatever, it's not that spectacular. And Curse breaks Asgard's shield because he's stronger than Thor and his hammer with his hand, or hands. And Malekith finds Frigga and Plain Jane when he's trying to take the power back, and Curse kills Frigga, which I feel very bad for Rene Russo because she has very little to do in this this series so far. And now she's dead. Goodbye. See ya. Stan Lee has a pretty silly cameo with Eric Selvig explaining the realms of Norse mythology and how they connect, and nobody's listening to him, and Stan says, "Can I have my shoe back?" Yeah, I'm afraid it's too silly of a cameo. Thor asks Heimdall, Sif, and Volstagg, and I forget the blondie's name, but he's a dude, to help, and he's played by Zachary Levi, so please tell me what his name is later on. to help Thor escape Loki out of his cell. And while that's happening, to get Jane out of there, there's a Captain America cameo by Chris Evans, and that was fun. So they get plain Jane out of Asgard to get to this dark world, to get that power out of plain Jane and to kill off Malekith. And that whole sequence was fun as well. Loki betrays Thor for a brief moment for a plan, and Malekith gets the power of out of plain Jane's, and suddenly it was all a trick, and Thor versus Curse happens, and that was a brief fight. Meanwhile, Loki kills off some dark elves, and after he comes to rescue Thor from Curse. And suddenly he gets killed, which came out of the blue, and now Curse is dead for good. And Loki's death was a sad moment because Tom Hiddleston really does have charisma in this series. But I'll talk about the ending a little bit. The fight between Thor and Malekith was kind of a good battle, but it leads to many different places, in like the Dark World. In some parts of London to end the world that looks like blood. Meanwhile, Darcy and the intern have a saving life kiss, which was odd, and plain Jane and Eric see it. I thought it was for comedic reasons, and it was not that funny to me. Thor gives up his power of being the god of thunder so he can be with plain Jane, and that was unconvincing. And suddenly we see Loki replacing Odin, which I think I know how, but I'm not going to explain it here. I think he was acting as the guard after his death, and now he's alive, and I believe it. During the credits scenes begin, Tadalier Tivan, aka the Collector, played by Benicio del Toro's scene, was odd for setting up not only for Avengers Infinity War, but the Guardians of the Galaxy. That felt very odd, and that in the line 1 down 5 to go, I think he's talking about the Infinity Stones for the new movies, so it makes sense. That's the during the credits scene. And after the credits is Thor getting back together with plain Jane, and the frozen monster chasing birds and trying to eat them was completely unnecessary. So yeah, that's the movie. And it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 5.1 out of 10. This may be the weakest of the official Avengers series by far. It had some silly moments and had some fun moments, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough for me to like the movie more than I did. And I'm going to just say it was just okay. It wasn't like necessary to see. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and now we'll be back next week with Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And before I say goodbye, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to subscribe, watch some more videos, and please leave a positive comment on the bottom. And until next time, Avengers Assemble!